When you are prepared to finish a Unity project, or at least test it as a finished piece of software and make sure it's functioning without being in the Unity editor, that's when you build the project. This is sort of like if you're working on a document and you want it on paper, you got to hit print, or if you're making a film or a video, you eventually have to export to an MP4 or something like that. Right now, our Unity project functions in Unity if you have Unity, but really we want to deliver something that people could open on their computer or their mobile device without them having to have Unity. So the way we do this is we make sure our project is functioning. When we hit play, it works. It doesn't say any outstanding compiler errors that needed to be solved before we can run the thing. And then we also want to ensure that the scene we're trying to build is open. So just as a reminder, you have potentially multiple scenes inside assets. You might have just one, in a project like this where you're just making like sort of your first world. But if you are making a game or an experience that has multiple scenes that we transition between, we want to make sure those are open, because when we go to File and then Build Settings, the first thing we want to make sure is that we add our scenes to the build, because by default there aren't any. So we're going to add open scenes. And that's the one that I want. Next, we're going to pick which platform we're trying to build for. Right now, I'm going to build for PC on Windows as a standalone piece of software, meaning if I gave it to anybody who was running Windows, they could double click on it and it would open. They don't have to have Unity at all. If you've got a Mac and you want to deliver for Mac, you would do it in the same place. You would just switch the target platform to Mac in this pull down. If you pull this down and you're like, wait, it doesn't have Mac, what's wrong? That's because you have to install any of the target platforms back in Unity Hub. So I didn't choose to install a Mac build on this computer. But if I want one, I would go to Unity Hub and then installs, and then I'd go in the version that I'm working with here and notice that it has Windows and Universal Windows Platform. And if I want anything else, I click the gear and I add module. So now I can add build support for something else that I wouldn't otherwise be able to build to. So here's where Mac would be, Linux, any of the mobile OSs, things like that. Another area we want, after installing a new build support module, I have found you've got to close your current Unity project and open it back up before the build setting target platform actually shows up. So if your Unity project was open while you were doing all that in Unity Hub, it might still just say Windows, but now I've closed it, opened the project back up, and now I have a Mac OS option too. Another area we want to look at before we go ahead and click build is the player settings down in the bottom left. If you click this, this is inside our project settings. You can also get to this under edit and project settings and then clicking player. This window allows you to make a couple of important changes. If you're publishing this software for anyone besides yourself, you're going to want to get rid of things like company name, default company. This is your company name, and the product name is like Cool Game Tree Drop or whatever. This is where you get to name the software that you're publishing. You can put in version numbers. You can give it an icon. If we're ultimately going to create an app here that is an exe file for Windows or an app on Mac that you can double click and run. So by default it'll be Unity's icon, but if you want to make an icon for your software, you can do so in Photoshop and then just drop the file in here. It can take any kind of image file that you turn into a texture 2D in Unity. So other things that you might want to change here are under resolution. If you want your game to not be full screen, you can change this to windowed and then pick the size of the window and things like that. Other things that you might want to change here are the splash image, what sort of pops up on the screen as you open up the software. And in other settings, there are some quality changes related to texturing and lighting and things of that nature. I'm going to leave all of these as standard, but if you find you are having trouble building for some particular computer or some particular use case, there's a lot of options here that can be adjusted. When we've gotten to our place where all of our settings are as we want them to be, then we come back to the build settings and we hit build. So by default, it's going to show us our root directory of our project, and I like to create a new folder in here called builds. And then inside builds, I think it can be useful to create a folder that is named for the platform. So right now we're just going to make a Windows exe file, but later if I want to release this game on Mac or whatever, it'd be easy then to create a Mac builds folder and keep them separated. So under Windows, we're going to select that folder, and then Unity is going to build all of the data that we need to run this as a standalone piece of software. When it does, it's going to open up that folder and show us everything it made. So when you make a Unity build for Windows, you get the exe file, that's the thing that you run, plus a bunch of extra files that are the data and drivers and things that Windows needs to have to run this. So if you wanted to distribute this, the easiest way would be to zip all of this together as one compressed .zip file and give it to a friend or colleague or whatever. But if you want to create an installer, there are free installer creator softwares out there that would help distribute this file. So on Windows, it's as easy now as double-clicking the exe, and we're going to see our game in full screen, and this is playable on any computer that has Unity or that doesn't have Unity. Only difference you really need to know about on Mac is there are options for the different processor types that Apple supports currently. So up until, when was it, 2020 or 2021, Mac was using Intel processors, and then they started making their own chips, the M1 chips and things like that. So by default, Unity is going to build for both. But if you knew you only wanted to support one or the other, you could choose. And the app you would make would ultimately just be smaller in file size. But it's going to support both by default, and that works for me. I will hit build, and then we're going to go inside the builds folder that we made when we were making a Windows build, and I'm going to make a Mac folder. And that'll be the folder to build to. It's going to go through a similar process that it did for Windows. And even though I'm making this on a Windows computer, I can build a piece of software for Mac. And then if I zip it and send it on a thumb drive or email or Google Drive or whatever, we're going to be able to distribute this. Weirdly enough, Unity doesn't actually put the Mac build inside the Mac folder that we told it to, so we can drag this whole thing, mac.app, into the Mac folder, and then inside the mac.app, if you open it on Windows, you will be able to see all the data and stuff that is required to make a Mac app work. But on a Mac, this would just be the double-clickable app. So we can rename this to, our software name, and then this folder or app, as the Mac OS will see it, can just be distributed to any Mac and double-clicked to run.